Yeah, so here we go. I'm thinking about putting in the test category for this compare and contrast essay because mostly I think it's functioning more as a test. Like I really do, guys, want you guys to put in the detail work on it. So let me explain because this is one of the most like, wait, that happened in history chapters? Whoa, that's crazy, is how I would describe it. And it's driven by the gunpowder empires. So just giving you the idea, what are we going over again? You remember the gunpowder empires. This one in particular is going to be, well, Russia, okay, the Ottoman Empire, and then China, okay? And I think I'm going to go straight through. It's really easy to go like, might even do this next time where it's like you're comparing them and contrasting them. But like, I need to just like kind of give you guys the basic stories. Now with this, just in terms of what you're writing about, they all have, what do we call it? They all have European influence. So if you even look at the name of the chapter, it's the like imperialism. So there's this sense that it's going on there. It's in different degrees. They all have to do reforms because of that. And some are more than formed and less reformed. They all have outdated armies. And so that's always funny to me to talk about. And they're all radically affected by World War I, in the sense that like all of their governments basically turn over at the same time in the era. The Russians will become communist, the Ottoman Empire will be no more, and the Chinese will become a republic. There will be no more dynasty. Both of those two happened in the 20s, even so. And then they all have wars or conflicts. Now, that should be natural because remember, Russia and China were fighting over the Amur River, and now they are not. So just kind of get the idea is this is mostly a similarity, as you can see. And my guess is you're going to go similarity and you got to look for differences sort of idea. And so that's kind of what I'm setting up here as it's going there. Now, I'm just going to start with China. Okay. I'm starting with China because, well, I honestly think this might be my favorite, just like individual, like era that goes through here, mostly because I didn't know anything about it before. I entered into AP World History, and then when I started learning this, I was like, did that really happen? Okay. China is led by Empress Dowager Zixi. And reminding you, you're in the Qing Empire, not to confuse this. Remember a little bit about the Qing Empire. If you remember, they're Manchurian. So they aren't exactly Chinese. Got it? And so who's leading it? Yes, an empress. How did an empress leading go last time? Bad. Now explaining this, dowager is just a fancy like noble word for saying widow. And in short, what happens is she's a young empress that when the emperor dies, she doesn't outright lead. She picks whoever the leader is going to be and then puppet masters him. Okay? Like literally, he is sitting in front on his throne and she is behind in a veiled box telling him what to do. And this happens for 4 or 5 emperors, all her kids. And she will actually pick, of all names, Ping, the last emperor of China, which is a story for another day. Okay? But the basic idea is you kind of have, she's often called the Dragon Lady, and she is seen very, very negatively in the Western world. And then she's got this problem because technology has left China behind, and yet she believes like China is the big empire, okay? And that's going to lead to more conflicts in China in this era than anything else. Okay, so European influence is mostly Britain, okay? And here's the thing, China is relatively closed off. And this is, remember, they're isolated. And so Britain wants them to open up. They only have Canton open. And you'll see that by not trading, they're hacking the British off. At some point, I don't remember if it's a DBQ or a test, you will get this crazy quote from an emperor, like one of the emperor's subjects, talking about how these infidels keep coming in, these barbarian infidels keep coming in, and then you realize it's the British, and their barbarian queen, Queen Victoria, right, is like completely doesn't understand the ways of heaven. And so Empress Dowager Zitzi and the emperors are trying to keep it this way. And by and large, it's there. I'll come back to the reforms because basically what they have, probably more so than the rest of, well, no, the Ottomans would be ticked if I said that. They would be really ticked. Okay, I'll get to that in a second, is they have a bunch of conflicts. So basically, here's what happens. You have the, what are they called? Opium War 1. Then you have Opium War 2. And then you have the Taiping Rebellion. And this is just going to become its own little like thing for a little bit. And then I'll just go the Boxer Rebellion. Okay? And all of these, she has some sort of hand in it. Mind you, they last, this is over like 60 years. The Boxer Rebellion is actually for another chapter. I'm just listing it here because this stuff all gets lumped together when you actually do it on the test. Okay? And so Opium War 1, I think I may have described it to you already, but basically the Chinese emperor declares opium illegal in China. The British then bring over opium from India and are force trading it into China. The bureaucrat, remember the Confucian bureaucrat who receives the opium says no, they don't listen to him. And so he says, you have rebelled the order of the emperor. You deserve to die, and executes some, whatever, a ship's worth of European traders. At this point, you guys already know this, they send over the nemesis and basically just show the magic boat to the people who don't know what a steam engine is and a repeating gun, and show their power in the 1860s, very easily defeating the Opium War. Got it? And here's the thing that's fascinating to me about it in terms of European influence, because this is where it gets bad. Remember, Britain doesn't care about territory, even though they are going to take over a lot. They care about money. Got it? They care that they don't want to take over China and have control of it. They want trade. And what happens is the nemesis basically forces them into submission. Got it? And they basically say, let's make a deal. At that point, they put in the only reform that happens here. They're probably the least reformed, which is the Nanking Treaty. And it forces them to open up like 5 ports. Okay? And all the British, they don't care if the emperor's leading or whoever are. That looks like sports. 5 ports. The only one that I know off the top of my head is Shanghai, just because it's one of the most populous cities in the world and one of which trades a lot with the United States, in particular into San Francisco. Canton is the one that's always there, but Shanghai is the one that, I'll just put it this way, becomes like the big deal one as you guys are going forward there. So I think 5 ports are opened up. That's really the only changes that happen in China in this era. They keep the emperor system. It is still an absolute monarchy. It's controlled by the mandate of heaven. It is absolutely powerful. However, the British keep making inroads. And here's what happens. They reject the opium again after submitting to it. And so this time they actually send a war over, and they actually send an army over. And the army is wholly outdated compared to the British. And by this point, the British are pretty much using repeated guns, right? They're using what we would, think of Western movies as the Colt 45, but it's going to be rifles that are repeating, all that sort of stuff. And what is being used instead is the Bannerman, okay? And the Bannerman, which is drawing almost like I know it's Japanese, but like a Shanghai type of name, right? Like think they have big flags on their backs and think they're trying to be intimidating with their gunpowder, are sitting there. And one of the pictures you guys will see is a Bannerman. It's one holding this very long barrel with his finger in his ear, and then another one coming behind it and shooting them. I mean, these are so outdated it takes 2 guys to 1 gun. And also, these guys are farmers. These guys are not a trained soldier. These are the like guys you call up compared to the professional British soldier running in total unison. And what happens is they send a colonel over and he just starts winning battle after battle after battle after battle. Like they don't even send a large army. And at that point, the Chinese submit and more trades are done. I can't remember. That might even be when the Nanking Treaty kind of took place. So the bannermen are the outdated army sort of idea. Okay. Now at this point, you're kind of going like, well, okay, so the British are making the Chinese submit. This sounds relatively normal. And then this happens, the Taiping Rebellion. So this is inland China. So inland China, think these people have never seen anyone that's British or anyone from Europe or anyone from Africa or anywhere else. Got it? This is not on the trade route. This is in the center of China and no one is there. What happens is this is going to sound weird, but a guy claiming to be Jesus's brother, and I don't even know, even the explanation of this, like even when I've read it, doesn't even seem real. It's like some guy who sat in like these ports started to get Christian missionaries, and he started going, ooh, Christianity, new religion. He starts to invade and take over inland China and break it off from there. And he breaks off inland China because nobody of the outsiders care. The Europeans don't care. And he just, over time, takes over land after land after land after land after land. Here's how he does it. He uses female soldiers. Got it? He is declaring like a one world nation. Think again, Confucianism, think how anti-Confucius this is. Let's take the women, shave their heads, send them out into battle, let the women act like men. And then they actually are able, because the bannermen are so few, and this is such a wide, big thing, that it's there. And a bunch of people die. Well, Empress Dowager Zixi is like, oh no, now I've got big time problems in the center of there. So she does some horrific human rights acts, like destroy the dam so that the people below in the village where the Taipings might be are completely just washed out and wiped out. Like just kill whole villages in response to that. Got it there? And that creates a massive tension. And eventually she gets so frustrated with them, she calls the British. Remember that army that was defeating us in Opium War I and Opium War II? Can you send one in order that we can defeat these female soldiers in inland China? So literally the same colonel goes back and just beats all these thrown together massive little armies that are led by the Taipings, and it lasts for like years. What's fascinating about the Taiping Rebellion is Mao Zedong, when you're forming the Communist Party, will follow Jesus' brothers outline. You start in inland China, you raise the women into power, completely reject Confucianism, and then go take over kind of the countryside. Everyone kind of see it there? And so to me, this is one of the weirdest things. By the way, like the total amount of death that I just described here is greater than World War I. Not World War I and the Spanish influenza, but like there's so many people in China, because part of what they're dealing with is a population boom, is that like it's there. Okay, it's there. By then, by the time you hit the Boxer Rebellion, you have a new problem, a new invader, and that is going to be Japan. Okay, Japan around 1900 starts becoming an imperial power that's able to invade, which takes its own story. And as Japan invades, and you have Britain heavily involved in economics, and they continue to do things, all of these groups will be underdeveloped. Just guys, whenever you hit this era and you hit anywhere in the world, underdeveloped, meaning that they don't, I didn't spell that right, underdeveloped. Whenever you see that in the era, mention that it's underdeveloped, which means economic imperialism starts to hit. What did I write there? And it's a new word. Just make it up. Underdeveloped. Imperialism. These words, guys, like should be all over your essay, because what is being concerned about here is is um, the let's keep China. It probably gets a train, right? But then they've got to trade all of their resources over to Britain or over to European countries in order to do so. And we got it there. That's the economic imperialism. Well, Japan gets in the game, and they're going to take over, of all places, Manchuria, which is obviously going to hack off the queen. So what does she do? She says China needs to be for China. We're the creators of karate. Let's go battle. The mandate of heaven has said, go, karate soldiers, go fight. And so the term boxer here, you might as well say ninja. Like, I mean, that's how they think of themselves. And how is ninjas going to fight against guns? About as good as that, one scene in The Last Samurai or in Indiana Jones or whatever it may be. If somebody has a gun, they don't have to fight you, in hand-to-hand fist combat. It doesn't work well. Here's the problem. China, even now, they struggle with outsiders. They struggle with them in trade. Remember that on the bottom of the Chinese social ladder is the merchant. And in general, they don't like these outsiders invading and coming in. Okay? So as you guys are reading the chapter, doing the notes on it or whatever, start picking up those details that will make this a part of it. So then compare and contrast the essay. I'll probably give you a generic prompt from the AP website, and this will be a part of it. Okay, Gunpowder Empire number 2, the Ottoman Empire. Okay, these guys have actually the lowest European influence, the lowest reforms, and an army comparison is just dumb. The most conflict. Anyhow, you can compare with the Ottomans. I would say they definitely have the most death, if I want to put it in terms of war death. But the Ottomans are going to get a new nickname. It's called the Sick Man of Europe. Okay? And so European influence is basically they are propped up, that is, the country shouldn't even exist, by the European diplomats. And what you're going to see is this is the era, and this is for a later chapter, of the balance of power. And we don't want France having too much power. We don't want the new country, Germany, to have too much power, definitely. And we don't want the British to have too much power. And we don't want Austria-Hungary to have too much power. So we need to hold that all in tension and in balance. So how do we do that? Well, right here is easy pickings for territory for said countries, especially the Austrian Empire, definitely the Germans, and even to the British to a certain degree. They're going to take over Aden, if you remember the port in the Middle East. But here's the basic point, that you got to, if you take over some of the land in the Ottoman Empire, another country is going to then declare war on you. Do you get the idea? So that's what happens to Russia, and I'll explain that in a moment. Because I'm trying to think in order, how did this happen? Okay, I think in order I need to talk about a couple of the conflicts. The first conflict is already been mentioned in your book, is Muhammad Ali in Egypt. Okay, this is a big problem because basically Muhammad Ali is an Ottoman general leading the state of Egypt. And then all of a sudden he realizes the Egyptian army is more powerful than the Ottoman army. So what would he rather do? I'd rather be emperor of Egypt than general of the command. So he uses nationalism. Everyone should have their own nation. They should be able to fight against, those tyrannical governments like the Ottomans, the Ottoman sultans, or whatever it is, and he breaks it off completely. Well, this gets repeated by Serbia, Greece. So remember, they have a lot of control in the Aegean Peninsula, like Armenia. You got all these countries that want their own country, and they're constantly fighting with the Ottomans to get their freedom. Mind you, the Ottomans are massive, and these guys are small, and the Ottomans keep losing these nationalistic battles, and it leads to the big problem for the Ottomans is loss of territory. They keep losing it, and when you lose Egypt, you don't have the ability to support the rest of your army. And then I would say if you follow the World War I, which we'll do later, it's just another loss of territory. They lose Saudi Arabia, essentially. and this time will be led by a British guy. The big conflict, though, is a shared one. So I can almost put it here because it's both this one. It's Russia versus the Ottoman in the Crimean War. And this one demonstrates why this is so important for the Ottomans. Basically, so it's shared. This is Russia versus Ottomans. So this one is really important. Yeah, fight off. And here's what happens. Okay, the Ottomans have control of Jerusalem, and they have control of the Hagia Sophia. These are Russian Orthodox holy sites. So Russia says you're not letting us go visit those places, which was not true. The Ottomans didn't have any control over those places. They just everyone was going to visit them. They're like, yes, we are. And they're like, no, you're not. And they're like, yes, we are. And they're like, finally, like, forget it. We're going to fight a war. So where do they fight the war? The Crimea. It had nothing to do with it. It was just a reason to pick a fight. Got it? And the Crimea, remember, is that peninsula that hangs down into the Black Sea and controls a lot of the trade. Because remember, Russia needs a seaport. Got it? Well, the Ottomans are relatively beat up, and the Russians are coming off having just punked the France. They're the ones, even more so than Britain, that kind of did the heavy lifting of the fighting to defeat Napoleon. And they have been risen in the European conflict, right? And so now they're ready to take over some Ottoman land, and they have full right to, and they have the power to do it. And so what happens? Well, they start to win. They win over the Crimea. They win over a bunch of stuff. And then France and Britain and Germany get involved. And all of a sudden, Russia is diplomatically fighting the three largest countries in Europe through the Ottoman Empire. Now, they don't directly fight Russia. They give money to the Ottomans, and they give weapons to the Ottomans. So the Ottomans get weaponized and then are basically able to fight the Russians to a stalemate so that we keep the borders that existed before. Everyone got the idea there? Then, because now the Ottomans owe a bunch of money to the French, the Germans, and the British, this is so genius. They basically go, well, I guess we get this section of land. Well, this just became our colony. Well, this just became our land. And that is how France will end up with Morocco and Algeria. That's how Britain will end up with Aden, and Germany something else that I'm forgetting. Everyone got it there? So loss of territory. So basically their friends in Europe, right, just take their land that Russia would have taken anyhow. Everyone got the idea? It's a little bit different because it's all diplomatically done. But you can get the idea that the Ottoman Empire is shrinking and falling. So what do they need to do? Well, they need to get rid of the outdated army. So they create a new army. And the new army is going to wear fezzes. Okay, because you have a problem here. As a Muslim culture, you're always supposed to be, religiously attired, right? And so you're going to see they have those little top hats they usually associate with, like, I don't know, those, what do they call them? I forget what the name is. But they're going to start wearing those for their armies, and then they're going to start updating their weapons. Okay? I need to show you a picture of it. It's in your book. It's not even like when you read it in there. It's like a, I don't know how to say it, a little hat, and I don't know. There's like, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm wanting to say. But it's like, I don't know, like that. Think about that in terms of like a religious sense. Like we're putting a fez on a monkey is not good. And then we take this new modern army that has modern weapons, and what do? They go over to where the Janissaries are, and they wipe out the Janissaries. And the Janissaries had become such a large traditional money, waste of money. The new modern army. Yeah, an updated modern army.
How did they do that? Like, how did they update it?
They get repeating guns. They get at certain level later on, it's machine guns. That's really what's kind of defining between the two. And then the repeating guns versus the muzzle loaders. Janissaries are still shooting cannons, while these guys are probably still on horseback, but shooting with repeated guns. It's just the technological advantage that's going on there. And to do that, they have to do a lot of trade and a lot of update. So the most important leader, make sure you have a leader for each one. And this one, I think, is Selim. It is definitely Selim. I think it's the third. And Selim III rules for like 40 or 50 years, and he drops all, unlike Empress Dowager Zizi, he drops all the traditional Ottoman garb. He does not wear a big hat, if you remember it, like Suleiman. You remember the big hat Suleiman had on and all that stuff? He is going to put on a general's outfit. He's going to look like a Napoleon, and he's going to become basically a constitutional monarch. Okay, constitutional monarch needs a document. His is a multiple documents made over years that are called the Tanzimat reforms. And what is happening is you've got all these different groups, right? Like here I listed some of them there that need some form of rights. And the medieval system that the Ottomans were using, where you had like the emperor doled out a responsibility and then you gave him back, you know, what form of taxes you're going to do, is so outdated that they need to basically go, Tanzimat reforms is going to lead to some sort of like electoral body system that isn't really elected. Does that make sense? But it represents all these different groups that are going in that. In the midst of that, what that doesn't do, because one of the big problems for the Ottoman way over the Chinese is they're super cosmopolitan. Remember, they got all these different races and all this different stuff. There's a mix of a whole bunch of people. And, well, how does that work for nationalism, right? So think they have control, just if I use these ones right here, Serbia and Greece. There are Greeks throughout Turkey. Now Greece wins a war and defeats and gets their land back in Greece. So what are you going to do with all the Greeks in Turkey? You're going to send them back? And that's the issue that they're struggling with, yet these guys are a major part of their economy. The Armenian genocide will originate out of that strain, because Armenia thinks Eastern Turkey should be Armenia, and traditionally it should be. And then and then they're like have some people that are fighting for land, some people working with the Ottoman Empire, and that's going to lead to the Turks don't trust the Armenians, so they try to Holocaust them in World War I. You can kind of see the picture there, how it's a nationalistic war, because the big issue going on here, again, I've written it probably twice, is nationalism. How do you keep a bunch of different people groups under the same empire if you're going to have, I have my right to have my country and my land go on there? And that tension right there is probably the most important thing throughout the entire 1800s. It's everyone getting nationalism, going like Germany for the Germans and Serbia for the Serbs. Yes, Tamber. Yeah, that is I'll say in the 20th century, that's the largest issue, the 1900s, largest issue, because essentially when they do finally create Turkey, right, you're going to see all the Greeks do get kicked out and all the Armenians do get kicked out. And they're given their own little spot of land that isn't near big enough for Armenia. And I would say Greece is probably not big enough for the Greeks. And then Turkey becomes Turkey for the Turks, if that makes sense. It's very similar, actually, like in the 20th century to the, except it's religious for India, the Pakistan and India. All the Muslims need to move to Pakistan. All the Hindus need to move to India, right? If I put it in religious terms. And so that issue of deporting people is the tension that's playing out there. What else do I need to say about this? I felt like there's another conflict. World War I is, with the Ottomans, is fascinating because, do you guys know Churchill? Or Winston, if I say Winston Churchill, do you know who that is? He is going to very foolishly try to take over the Dardanelles. This is on the other side of the Black Sea, where Constantinople is, where Istanbul is, right? Their capital, because that's still their capital. All those beautiful buildings, all that stuff is still there. And his navy, the best navy in the world, gets punked by the Turks. Got it? And they'll just by getting trapped in the Dardanelles, which is really dumb. Final thing to mention here, just in terms of reforms, the guys who are for nationalism are called the Young Turks. They, on the one hand, want enlightenment, voting, right? They want freedom, no slaves, all that sort of stuff. On the other hand, they want nationalism, which means Turkey for the Turks. Like, so when Tanvir's asking the question, the Turks would like to kick everyone out of the country. Does that make sense? They'd like to also get rid of all the peoples that are in the way of making Turkey this perfect Turk-only haven. And that tension is really, really strong. Got it? So, because these two things seem diametrically opposed It's basically going, voting for my people and no one else. Got it? Does that make sense? So, all right. Russia. Okay, quick thing on leaders of Russia. They basically alternate at this point. You get Nick the One, Nicholas the First. I'm just shortening it to Nick. Alexander the First. Wait, I did that wrong. Alex the First, then Nick the First. Yeah. Then Alexander the Second, which is the focus of this this one right here that I'll talk about, and Nicholas the Second, who's during World War I, and he has a religious leader named Rasputin that I think we looked up before, and he's really ugly looking. Did you guys look up Rasputin? I'm not wrong on this, correct? Anyhow, don't worry about that yet, just because I don't want to get too distracted by Rasputin. But it is a strange story. Like, it is very, very strange. Have you guys at least seen what is that? The name of that movie? The Anastasia.
Oh yeah.
Rasputin would be the bad guy in Anastasia. I also believe. Anyhow, it's probably a movie none of you watched. Never mind.
No, I saw Anastasia. It was so weird.
Yeah.
Everything was green at the end.
The entire in the October Revolution, the entire family of these guys will get murdered, and the rumor even today is that a princess escaped, Anastasia. That's the thing that's going on there. Just for your other things, this line is called the Romanovs. For those of you that are Black Widow fans, there you go. These are the Romanovs, for which Romania is named. There you go. Okay. Okay. European influence. Okay, the big deal with them, beat Napoleon. I just said that already. I don't think I need to say it again. But in the Battle at Waterloo, Napoleon is defeated. It is the Russians who will bear the bulk while the British have the guns, if that makes sense. Russia has the men, British has the technology. And in terms of outdated arms, they are just underdeveloped, and they have a bigger population than they do weaponry, and they keep fighting wars with 2 guys and 1 gun. Like, they don't have enough guns for everyone. This will conclude World War I, and this is going to outdate the Cossacks, who are their version of the Bannermen or the Janissaries, that basically are going to war to fight, but they don't have the guns that are going on there. And the other thing I'll say about them, and this is in terms of reform, they're still in a feudal system with serfs, right? And so that needs to end, because their only real reform will come after the Crimean War and after they lose it, which is to end serfdom in Russia, okay? And so that ends this idea that this guy is the most powerful face of the earth. He is no longer a czar, if that makes sense. He has to give up power to all of the people around them. Now, basic idea is Alexander the First is nice. He's going to fight Napoleon and win, and he's good friends with John Quincy Adams. His main language is English, because he's somehow married into the British monarchs. And it's super awkward, because when he's hanging out with John Quincy Adams, he's like, I'm about as Russian as you are. He's literally not there. But as he sits up, and as they beat Napoleon twice, remember, Napoleon invades, then he gets kicked off to the island, and then 10 years later comes back. He's seen as the hero or the reformer. He's then followed by Nicholas the First, which basically means I need to go back tyrannical. Forget expanding, forget working with Europe. I need to be Russia for the Russians. And I'm back to invading random spots and growing beards, if I go back to the not Peter the Great, era. And he's an anti-reformer. He wants to keep Russia as its czarist place as it is. And then that's going to create enemies, right? And now Europe is frustrated. So Alexander II, when he takes over, it comes up with the idea of the Crimean War, and basically realizes these guys are weak, we can take their things. What he's not thinking about is diplomacy. He's not thinking that, wait, Germany doesn't want Russia as a close neighbor. They would like some buffer states between them. They want Poland right there between them. So, they can trade off invading it. Don't ask. Okay. Or they want Romania in between them. So there's a reason why those states in Eastern Europe all exist. It's because of that. And so Alexander II goes and invades, and people start to say, look, Russia's getting too powerful. If they get their seaport, then they're going to win. right, the war, and then end up losing the war to Britain, France, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire. And then Alexander II is now, his name is Mud, because he lost. He's the emperor that lost. And so that's why he comes through and does the reforms. Well, it turns out that Alexander II is relatively enlightened and wants to bring about bodies of government. He wants to bring about learning and wants to bring about culture. And so one of the things I want to just note here, it's kind of awkward to put in reforms, is this is the era of high Russian literature. And what's happening is their printing press is going nuts. And you have Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, who I haven't read Tolstoy. I've read a decent amount of Dostoevsky. But Tolstoy is arguably the greatest writer in history, and he might be fighting with only Dostoevsky. And they're critiquing this whole system of, we got a feudal system still here. You've got nobles that have no money. You've got up-and-coming merchants that are going on there. You've got poor princesses that have been ostracized. You've got people trying to work up the battles. And you can get like one of the books that Dostoevsky writes is Crime and Punishment, which is it starts out with a murder. A student kills a pawn shop owner because logically people think Napoleon's a great man because he killed people. So therefore, if I kill someone and can handle it, I will be a great person. And then I can move up. I'll also have the money to be able to go to university and, fight for my ideas. It's a reverse mystery where like, what happened, and the big drama is, will he confess? So anyhow, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy both are Russian Orthodox Christians. There's a lot of Christian themes in them. And I'm saying this all so, you'll read books from Mrs. Chang. Okay. Basic idea, you could argue that those things are going on. But essentially that Crimean War takes that kind of ability to war out of their system. And as you get further and further along into the 1800s, they fall way behind. So like at the beginning of the 1800s, they're one of the European powers. At the end of the 1800s, they still think they're one of the European powers, but they're clearly not. Why? Well, they're going to lose the war to Japan. The Japan War. It is like everyone's like, wait, what? And guess what? They're fighting over Manchuria, and they see that Japan has taken over China and Manchuria. So what do the Russians do? Wow, free land for the taking. Let's go take over Manchuria, which, by the way, has a port, right? Which they need a port. It would be really good if Russia had a port. And what happens? The Japanese beat the Russians because they have not advanced at all in terms of shipping. They have trains that, in terms of their underdevelopment, they probably have the best train system, but they literally have nothing else. They do not have the steam engine running, full circle everywhere. They do not have steamboats. They do not have repeating guns. They do not have anything. Meanwhile, the Japanese have figured out how to get electricity into Japan and into Manchuria and are full on ready for World War I, which they don't fight in, and more so for World War II. This is why I'm kind of explaining also why Japan moves to the top here. And by the end of this, Russia, by the time the end of Alexander II's reign and into Nicholas II's, Russia is very, very weak. And it's a massive downfall throughout the 1800s. What else do I need to say? European influence. They awkwardly enough become united with France. What's that? Russia. Now, Japan is united with nobody in Europe. They could care less what's going on in Europe, except to learn technology. And then the basic idea is that's unnatural. So France and Britain and the United States are the only ones that hold, in this era, it's called liberal governments. Governments that elect their officials. Got it? But now, remember, Britain still has a queen, and France is going back and forth between having a king or not. But they're figureheads at this point, and the elected bodies are making these decisions. And so here's this, and you have Emperor Land uniting with the liberals to fight the constitutional monarchies, the Germans and the Austrians. And we kind of got the picture there. And so one of the things that's starting to happen is these really liberal forms of government, France and Britain, can't unite themselves with Germany, Italy, Austria-Hungary. And so they're looking for allies. And at the end of the 1800s, they're like, Russia will be our ally. Remember how they beat France at the beginning? Well, they'll become our allies, and then we'll beat Germany. No, it doesn't help at all. All right, I'll stop there, guys.